It's 3 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Tuesday, March 30th joint special call meeting of the Glynn County Board of Commissioners and the City of Brunswick. In an effort to adhere to the guidelines set forth by the CDC for the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being held via video teleconference. The public has simultaneous access to this meeting. The meeting will be streamed online for public viewing through the Glynn County Board of Commissioners Facebook and YouTube pages. I'd like to do a roll call for the Glynn County Commission and staff. Commissioner Tustin may be late or may not be able to join. Commissioner Findig.
Present.
Commissioner Bronson. He was having connection problems. He'll be back with us in a minute. I believe. Commissioner Booker.
Here.
Commissioner O'Quinn.
Here.
Commissioner Rafalski.
Here.
And Commissioner Neal here. Staff with us today is Catherine Downs.
Here.
Attorney Aaron Mumford.
Present.
Ronnie Patel.
Present.
Matthew Kent. And Pamela Thompson.
Present.
And Mayor, at this time, I'll turn it over to you for your roll call.
Thank you, Chairman Neal. I appreciate it very much. I'm Mayor Harvey with the City of Brunswick, and as Chairman Neal said, this is a video teleconference. I'd just like to call the roll for the commissioners for the City of Brunswick. First of all, Commissioner Vincent Williams. Maybe he will join us a little bit later. Commissioner Julie Martin. Maybe taking a little time to get on. Okay. Commissioner Johnny Cason.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Felicia Harris. It seems that my commissioner is taking a long time to get on. Maybe they're having some technical difficulties, but as you see, you just have myself and Commissioner Cason here. Also on our staff, we have our city manager, Ms. Regina McDuffie. And anyone else would please announce yourselves.
Ryan Corey, City Attorney.
Anyone else from the City of Brunswick on the staff? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chairman Neal, sir, as it seems right now, it's taking a while for my commissioner to get on board, but however, that should not stop us from continuing on. The ones they should be coming on as we continue the meeting, and if not, I will make sure that they will get the information as needed as we move forward. I think Commissioner Cason and myself and the staff that I have assembled will be able to articulate what's going on with the City of Brunswick. So thank you, sir, and back in your hands now, Chairman Neal.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we move forward, are there any other members from the Brunswick-Glynn County staff with us today? And hearing none, the purpose of our meeting today is for discussion and consideration of looking at an update for the Bay Street Corridor project from Kimberly Horn Associates, and Jonathan Guy will be making that presentation today. And at this time, I will turn it over to him.
Thank you, Commissioner Neal, and thank you, Mayor Harvey. Appreciate the time that both of your institutions have given to me today to talk about the Bay Street Corridor study. I think it's important for us to walk through to date some of the conversations that we've had, some of the initial work that we've done, as well as talk about the next steps on this project and times when we will get back together to discuss alternatives, recommendations, and then ultimately the finalization of this project. So let me start by talking about the corridor study in and of itself. It runs from I-95 to the north, down through Glynn County into the city of Brunswick. and then ultimately back over to Highway 17 on the east side of the peninsula. As you can see on your screen right now, if you're following along with me, you'll see the intersections that we've looked at, analyzing the operational impacts at those intersections, looking at the different recommendations that need to be considered at this place. I will state that we've narrowed some of those down. We have not finalized anything at this point, but we're working to do that in the next few weeks, though. But you can see we look all the way up at the interchange, the influence area up there, as you come across and you impact New Jessup Highway and Blythe Island Highway with Community Road. And then coming on down as you start to come by the pulp mill, and then at Selden Park, and then ultimately working down where you see Bay Street pull off of Newcastle and getting into the downtown and looking at the operational performance of that. I'm going to take a few minutes and sort of build a story here, talk about some of the volumes that we've seen along the corridor, as well as some of the influences that we determined are present in this corridor, and then ultimately walk you through some initial concepts, as well as some of the findings that we found relative to those concepts in some of our conversations. So let's talk a little bit about traffic volumes. This information was provided by the Georgia Department of Transportation. It's based off 2019 number. The average daily traffic volumes, as you can see, range from 23,000 up near the interstate, which is not surprising considering the connection with 95, and then starts to taper as you get down through the corridor as you approach downtown. And you can see it's still a significant volume as it starts to approach downtown. The volume splits at that point, which is why you see, if you're looking at your screen, about the 6,000 vehicles per day kind of peeling off Brunswick. The rest is coming into Newcastle, coming into the heart of downtown. And then there's some smaller volumes as you start to work your way in and around, and then ultimately coming back over here to 17 where you see those volumes come up. A lot of that has to do with the interconnectivity. It has to do with where volumes are ultimately trying to go. Are they trying to head to the islands? Are they trying to hit the terminal? Are they trying to go to downtown? Where is their destination? And that's important. So as we think about that, let's look at some of the crashes along the corridor, because this also tells a story as well as the volumes that are out there. Not surprisingly, you see if you'll remember those volumes up towards the interstate with 95, you've got a lot of drivers that are new to the area, either just hopping off the interstate or actually using this to connect over to a different destination, as well as Old Jacksonville Highway as you're coming in. These two areas, you're starting to see the predominant amount of crashes in the corridor, but you also have some others throughout as you kind of work your way in and around. Total 721 crashes along the corridor. There is a very small percentage that is serious injuries. As we start to look at the manner of the collisions, it's interesting to look and what that tells us as well. Rear ends are predominant, as well as looking at left angle crashes. That tells me, as we look at that in conjunction with the angle crashes, you've got congestion in the corridor, maybe a little bit of driver infamiliarity with the corridor conditions or the laneage that's out there, but also you have congestion. And that's the main thing that you're seeing. And those are concentrated in locations where we have observed, and the traffic volumes tell you based on operational analysis that you've got congestion at those locations. As I was talking earlier about mobility through the corridor, I wanted to highlight some of the destinations or the corridor influencers or attractors that you see there. And this is a mixture of different things. It includes downtown, as well as the causeway over to the islands. And that's important because it tells a story relative to how people move through your network. This is a very long corridor. It has a very broad range of context areas. We go from industrial areas, you have a port, you have a historic downtown, you go through neighborhoods. You also deal with just general business commercial corridors. And because of that, you've got a variety of different land uses that are out there, from heavy industrial like the pulp, you have the terminal, but you also have other places that are drawing people into. And it may not be a singular destination. That's why I have the causeway to the island. You've got individuals who may choose to take, if they're coming from the south, over the new bridge on 17 to connect up. You have others coming from the north who are choosing to take different connections around. All of those are attractors, but it all influences how both the crash patterns occur with collisions, as well as volumes moving through the corridor. And that's important for us to understand as we talk about some of the things that we're seeing. I think it's also important to highlight the fact that this corridor 341 is a GRIP corridor, which is the Governor's Road Improvement Program. Now, this goes back a long way. I wasn't even a practicing engineer at that time. But if you look, their goal, what was their goals? Well, connectivity, 95% of cities to an interstate. Economic development, looking for growth. How do we connect that? Efficient and safe mobility, creating safe corridors, which is a part of what this task is as well. And then also safety, reducing crashes along 2-lane corridors with the multi-lane widenings. Now, the corridor we're talking about, the Golden Isles Parkway, which you can see there, that goes all the way from I-75 just south of Atlanta over to your downtown and then connects over to 17. The majority of that corridor, if not all of that corridor, has been improved to a multi-lane facility. And so there have been improvements that have been done by the Georgia Department of Transportation. And that's important. If you think about the state's economy and you think about those attractors that are here, the port is one of those things. It has a tremendous impact upon the economy for the state of Georgia. And there's high competition for that. And so it's important to bear that in mind as we talk through some of these alternatives. Now let's jump into some of the intersections. We've talked a little bit about this. One of the priorities as I was talking with both the county and the city was looking at this intersection, the intersection of 4th Street and Newcastle at Selden Park. It's important for a variety of reasons. You've got connectivity to the neighborhood that comes across over to a park. There's a railroad there, and you've got a 5-lane facility. In some places, it's actually a little bit larger than that because you've got auxiliary turn lanes, like this right turn lane you can see northbound here on Newcastle Street. For those reasons, one of the requests of us was to look at alternatives. We collected some of our data. You can see here that there is some delay associated with the side street, which is not uncommon when you have volumes, which you can see up here. These are existing volumes that were collected and grown to account for COVID. But you can see about 1,000 peak hour trips coming towards Brunswick in the AM peak hour, and that flips. Not surprising, this is a commuter corridor, but 1,000 vehicle trips in your peak hours, AM and PM crossing through there, combined with the opposing, which is about 400. For that reason, you've got some conflicts trying to cross the street here. So much so that the city has reached out and had GDOT take a look at this through their safety program, and they provided us.
Weston, when do you see that happen next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? I mean, when you're getting back, I'm sure you guys have people that are really good at forecasting. And, we had heard at one time that many of the chain restaurants were predicting being back up and running pretty heavily by April, which I'm not sure that's going to happen throughout the country. But,
I'm going to put everybody on mute, and I'll unmute everybody here in just a little bit as we kind of finish up, go through some of this. We're getting just a little bit of feedback there. Just want to make sure we get through this. So the city had reached out to the Georgia Department of Transportation, their safety division. They looked at this intersection. They came up with what's known as an R-cut. You can see this on the screen right now, which is essentially a left in as well as left onto 4th Street. You can see Ross Road coming through here. And this what we call a Z configuration for pedestrians, connecting them across, bringing them into Selden Park. This was provided us to take a look at. We've had some initial conversations on that. I'll give you a little bit of feedback on that and maybe some alternatives to consider as we walk through that. One of the first things, while the Z crossing, you can barely see it in the background here, is one way to connect people across. If you're looking at minimizing the time at risk, which time at risk is the time at which you are in the through lanes or conflicting with traffic, I like to minimize that as much as possible. So one alternative or modification that we would recommend that potentially gets looked at is to remove the left onto 4th Street. There are connections both to the north and south that can work you into the street grid. And the reason for this is to provide the left into the park and access over here, but also to give individuals who are crossing the road, should they not be able to make it in the time that's allowed for the hawk signal, to pause here. Or to go all the way across and cross. It minimizes that conflict point. It makes it a more straightforward crossing if you're looking at those who may be visually impaired. A nice warning area through here for pedestrians to stage should they need to be staged. I will tell you, in looking at this and looking at the traffic volumes, while we did show a little bit of delay on the side street, that is not uncommon to see on any side street where you've got a multi-lane facility. What I will tell you, though, is that looking at the volumes do not come close to the level that needs to be there for a traffic signal. So as a part of this, we would not be recommending a traffic signal. Now, we would look at the potential for a hawk signal here, which is gives priority to the pedestrian. So it works in the same manner as a traffic signal in that you do stop traffic. So traffic would be stopped. So you create a safe crossing at this location. It is pedestrian activated. It would be activated on either side with push buttons to cause that to go into flash, to stop traffic, and then ultimately allow the pedestrians to cross. Understanding the importance of this left, not only for the community, but for the street grid, we somewhat modified this a little bit. It still allows for, so taking kind of the elements associated with the GDOT plan originally, and then what my recommendation was, which was the straight crossing of the neighborhood. What we did is we slightly modified the crossing location associated with Ross Road. Teed this intersection in a little bit, bring this more of a streamline in. It brings the pedestrian straight across again looking at a hawk signal at this location to control traffic, to allow that traffic to cross. We'll be able to stop this traffic, and this traffic. Since there's not necessarily a conflicting movement with the hawk crossing of this traffic would not stop. It would be a stop sign, though, but it wouldn't be under the provision of the hawk, this configuration. But this does allow that for that left turn. It doesn't allow the left turns out. I understand that for some people that may be concerning. On the park side, there's connectivity through Ross Road up if you do want to head back to the north. But this does accomplish the goal that was conveyed to us of looking at how do we create a safe crossing and connectivity to the park. We'll recommend wide sidewalks, improve that crossing grade coming through here with the railroad as that is improved, and then the slight alignment of this, offset alignment of this still allows for that left, but again creates that safe crossing. Now, one other option that was brought out to us, again, looking to control traffic and bring pedestrians through the intersection, we also looked at a roundabout at this location. And you can see here Newcastle streets running horizontal across your street. Fourth is here, Ross Road's coming in, and then, of course, you've got Selden Park over here. You can kind of see the outline of that. And while roundabouts are great, they do a lot of things. They control speeds. They bring things into compliance. They are still very good for mobility of trucking. As we look at the maneuverability of fire trucks, we look at the maneuverability of trucks. Again, remember, this is a GRIP corridor. So maintaining connectivity and access and economic development are all elements associated with that. You can accomplish that with this plan. What I will tell you, though, is this is a very, very expensive project to do this. You're looking at several $1 million to implement this. It does not control the pedestrian crossing. If you remember from the previous one, it was controlled through a hawk signal, which would allow for those pedestrians to have confidence that there is a light that is attempting to stop traffic. Again, you got to have people paying attention. Under a roundabout, you do not have that. And so you would be crossing in what would be known as a two-stage crossing to get across. Again, you also have the railroad through here, so you're going to have preemption to control this because you are now introducing the through movements into the roundabout. I will say this has been done. It's been done here in the state of Georgia. But again, it's an expensive option. You know, if you're comparing the two and you look at the benefit cost ratio between this and sort of the modified R-cut, which I showed previously, you're not going to realize the safety improvements with a project like this as you would with the previous one. And that just has to do with the overall expense of this, the time associated with this. Not to say that this is necessarily a bad idea. It's actually it's an interesting idea to solve this. I will tell you that as you look at Newcastle and you look at the distribution of speeds across the corridor, You will see, because you've got such a long gap before you hit a break, speeds can creep up. And with the volumes as they are, and again, it's about maintaining a nice, smooth flow along this corridor. Roundabouts can still provide that mobility, but they do impact this. So again, if you're balancing these two out, I would say that this probably begins to drop down a little bit lower over some of the other alternatives that we presented earlier. We'll step through another intersection, I think, and this one is kind of bringing it down into the city here and looking at the intersection. This is where Newcastle splits and Bay Street develops. It's an interesting corridor. It's got some very interesting geometry. You look at that split of volumes that's out there, but you also look at, more importantly, you look at the heavy vehicles that are still on that corridor. You're dealing with about 11% just north of the intersection, and you got about 16%. Now, again, that's total volume, and you can see the differences there, but you've got still a heavy amount of trucks. And if you'll remember what I talked about, there are alternatives that are friendly for controlling speed, but also maintaining mobility. One of the other things that I like, and I'll go ahead and reveal what we're talking about. Whoops. I think one of my slides got moved around here. Is this intersection here is an alternative, which is a roundabout. You can see the county administration building over here. This is Newcastle, and this is coming into downtown. And then this peels off. Still maintains multi-lanes coming in. Over here, you have the bypass lane, which is great for trucks coming through. But it also controls those speeds as you're coming in and allows circulation. Speeds are very high as you're approaching Newcastle and coming into downtown. This would provide a nice break to slow that traffic, to bring traffic to a manageable speed at this location. The other thing I like about this is the opportunity for a gateway into downtown. It's ceremonial. It sets a tone. A lot of times when you're dealing with corridors like this and you have a defined context area that changes. If you remember, just to the north of here, you've got a different feel of the corridor. You essentially have a 5-lane parallel to a railroad track. Here you're starting to create building forms, still needing to maintain mobility though. The roundabout is one of those solutions that helps to control speeds, that eliminates conflicting movements. If I go back just a couple slides here, we've got some interesting movements that are occurring. If you're looking at your screen here, the left turn actually comes up here, turns back upon itself. Now, we don't have anybody who's doing that when we looked at this, but you're conflicting with this movement that's trying to come out. If we advance over here and you look at the roundabout, you can see that's a more smooth movement.
Can we ask questions, Jonathan?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
Well, I think
Please
Ms.
interrupt.
Kelly has a hand up.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I just see that now. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I had a question about the roundabout that was proposed at the 4th Street intersection. You actually had that over a railroad track?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, in all actuality, there's no way that the railroad's going to move anything. So why would you propose that like that?
Well, for a couple reasons. It brings the control. This would be the design that you would want to bring the traffic in and control it, because you do have a railroad. If we were to shift this to the north, we would be impacting significant properties. Now, that is an option to do that. It makes it a whole lot more expensive. You get into other issues associated with impacting the community. If you try to shift it across the railroad, you get into other complications of bringing Newcastle Street across this. You also, if you go through the NEPA process, you would then enter into 4F. So you have a lot of complications. You also don't want to move the railroad track. So by running it down through here would be the appropriate way to look at putting a roundabout at this location so that it is controlled. Because again, we've got to control the movements around the railroad track. And so this would be the appropriate place to do that.
Okay, so the DOT had given us a $5.9 million price tag for a railroad that for a roundabout that did not, encompass the railroad. So what you're saying is that this design would be less costly than that?
It's probably on par with that cost, if not a little bit higher. It's somewhere between $5.5 to $7 million for this improvement.
Okay, Okay, well, I mean, you just said that it would be less costly than moving it, but I understand what you're saying about the railroad, but okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Any other questions before I'll go back to where I was at base, down at Newcastle. Just make sure we answer questions. I apologize for that. Didn't see the hand up. All right, let me jump down here and we'll talk about this intersection. So again, this is another alternative to move traffic. One of the things that we heard in some of our stakeholder conversations is potential development on the waterfront side of the railroad tracks over here. And so looking at that, how do you provide access? How do you create mobility in between these two? Again, a quick sketch that we've pulled up, and each of these are of these two roundabouts are being formalized a little bit more, as well as the ones up at the park at Selden Park, in a little bit greater detail so that it's better communicated. But looking at the potential for a crossing there, adding that fourth leg into the intersection, again, maintaining the mobility that we're looking for, creating the gateway, creating the circulation that we need. This is another way to bring into control. Now, this does have the same complications as it is crossing the railroad track, which brings up another level of coordination. But it also looks at in any sort of evaluation of this, if this was, to go forward, you would probably look at closing the additional crossing down here if you would want it access at this location. Bringing it into the roundabout brings it into the control, also gives you an opportunity to bring pedestrians in, and you start to create this corridor on either side. Again, alternatives, we're evaluating them as we look at the two between this. This is going to be the one that's going to be the most simplistic to implement. There is sufficient right-of-way at this location. You can fit this within the footprint of the right-of-way. There's no impacts to the railroad. Something a little more controversial would be to look at something like this, which would take it into the realm of dealing.
What's the cost, Jonathan, of the previous one? That one.
Something like this, you are, you're looking at $200,000 to implement this. We're working up cost estimates on this just so that we can provide you with that information. So your next update.
That is a roundabout, right? It
is a roundabout. Yes, it is. One of the things I like about roundabouts is that when you deal with communities along the coast where you can be prone to power outages because of hurricanes that come through here. If you think about a traffic signal, when you have a traffic signal that goes down because the power goes out, you need to have a police officer out there controlling that traffic because the control is gone. Roundabouts, you don't have to have that. So they work through power outages. They work through, traffic volumes that are there. They handle all types of different types of vehicles that are out there. So it's something that I think is worth consideration. This one at this location has a lot of merit for a variety of different reasons.
So why is the price so much less than for the Selden?
Sure, that's a great question. A couple things. Your overall diameter is much smaller. You're fitting it in with the right-of-way. You don't have to have any sort of positive control associated with the railroad. So you don't have to have any sort of gates or crossing gates or lights. None of that is needed at this point. This is, again, built on top of area that's already improved. So you've got, looking at this, obviously you need to do some engineering on this, but this would be easily implementable over some of the other improvements that are out there because you've got the space. You're building upon a footprint that's out there. These can be implemented relatively quickly, depending on, again, and a lot of this depends on how you approach this. Where we've got some of these green islands, they could be concrete. Well, that saves time and money. Other locations, depending on how you bring your crossings in, if there's any sort of configuration movements that you need to accommodate. What does it look like here on the area here around the circle where you can overtrack? What does that look like? Is it just concrete? Is it stamped concrete? So there's a variety of different elements that can affect the overall price. Do you do any sort of low landscaping? Again, the theory used to be that you only wanted the approach to be able to focus to what was coming, from your left. As we've designed roundabouts, having a clear line of sight is really important. So any sort of low plantings or any decorative things like that, as long as they're not distracting, are okay. It's ideal though for it to have really good lines of sight, and you do have that. Again, you're not playing with geography here, or topography, excuse me. So for those reasons, this can be implemented. We've seen these implemented all across the United States. They're getting to be very efficient as far as their construction and how we do that. Again, it all comes down to the details though. How expensive do you want to make this? Because you can make them pretty expensive, or you can put something in just to make it work. Any other questions on that one before I jump to another one?
Ed, that particular intersection, why is it necessary? Traffic seems to flow there pretty well already. Why are you suggesting?
A couple things. One of the charges here was to look at, let me back up, was to look at the operations of the intersection. And you're right, it does operate pretty well. You look at it, it's level service B, it's level service C as we project out in 20 years. It's still operating in a level service D. I think one of the things that does come up is you got two different factors you're looking at. You're looking at safety, you're looking at operations. Operationally, you probably don't need an improvement here long term. As you look at the safety of the intersection, there are some things that the geometry could be cleaned up to make it a little bit more friendly, looking at how the movements are and to make it operate a little bit better. So that's the reason behind that. You've got some unique geometry with how the movements are, how they turn. The other thing I want to mention is you got speeds. You got speeds coming down from, high of 55 miles per hour coming down in a very short amount of time into downtown, where you got a speed differential of upwards of 20 miles per hour as you're crossing this threshold through here. A roundabout helps to control that. Still allows for good circulation, good mobility through the area. And so it's an alternative. It's something that long term, as you look at it, it gives a couple different factors, not only from the safety, but also the beautification of the intersection. And it brings the configuration or the geometry into something that's more recognizable for a lot of the drivers. If you look at your driver population, which is, do you have folks who live here versus the visitors? You are a destination in the sense that you have people who are not from here driving through here. This geometry can be a little bit confusing for them. So standardizing that, putting it into something that's a little more familiar, helps to bring a little more clarity, and overall it improves the overall safety. Again, it takes out the conflicting movements that would be here between this movement and this movement, or any of the through movements that are coming in. It just makes it a little bit safer. Good question, though. Any other questions?
It makes it a lot safer for the future is what it does. And that's what we're looking at, is certainly the future.
Correct. I see Miss Martin's hand raised.
Yes. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If we wanted to soften the amount of concrete and pavement in that roundabout, if you can go to the slide where you had, yes, that one right there, where you have it sort of painted green, were you sort of thinking that, there could be low-lying drought-tolerant plants there? I mean, I guess we'd have to bust up the existing pavement or roadway to make that happen.
Absolutely. The areas, this channelizing island right through here, your little diverter islands that are here and here, as well as the center, as long as it's low, nothing over, 2 feet tall, even then something smaller than that is more ideal. But, drought tolerant plants, native grasses, whatever you want to do, something that's low maintenance is great for this area. One of the things about the center island especially is you look at maintenance and the influence of maintenance on traffic and maintaining mobility when you're trying to maintain that and the safety of the workers who are doing that. So anything that is low maintenance is ideal for this. It also helps to take out some of the impervious area that's here. So from a greening standpoint, there's a benefit associated with that. But there is opportunities for that in a variety of different locations that you could do some, low scale plantings that would help to use your word, soften the look of it.
So has that been factored in with the estimate, or will it be factored in with the estimate
Sure.
to some degree?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
there will be
Thank
a provision in there for that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
One of the things that the mayor and I had discussed at some of our breakfast meetings was being able to connect Mary Ross Park with the downtown district. And when you look at the traffic counts that you presented early on in this presentation of how low the traffic counts get once you go through this split on Bay Street, is it possible that we could downsize or at least do a study about downsizing the 4-lane to 1 lane in each direction and increase parking for downtown and provide a softscape for crossing from the library area at Gloucester Street across to Mary Ross Park and make it more friendly there?
That's a good question, and I'm going to get to that as we get into the presentation. I'm going to walk you through a series of what we've talked about, so I don't want to spoil the results. So give me just 1 minute. I'm going to talk about one more intersection, and then we'll jump over to that one and talk about that, because I figured that would be a lot of the conversation today and essentially what our findings have been. So I am going to back up and look at, I want to talk about this intersection over here. This is one of the polar intersections, again, the terminal point to the east, the intersection of 4th and Glynn, and looking at that intersection again, major parallel corridor, parallel to downtown, which is 17, which is intended to provide that southern connection up to the causeway to get you over. It has some very unique geometry, just like some of your other intersections. Lefts crossing over, lefts merging with exiting traffic. When you start to look at the volumes, you start to see that, while there's not a very heavy traffic coming off 4th Avenue onto Glynn, it is a significant volume at that intersection. You're probably going to be tired of seeing these, but one of our recommendations is, because you've got volume that on 4th that is somewhat smaller than what it needs to be, it's not at this point or in any of our projections going to get to a point that you would warrant a traffic signal at that location. But a roundabout does help to provide that mobility. When you start to think about future connectivity of any sort of parallel boardwalk facility along 17, having that access to come in not only here at 4th, but potentially to the north, into downtown, and connecting your residents to this, this gives you that opportunity to do that. Again, this is another one that fits within the geometry of what you've got out there. I realize that there's been some money recently spent on landscaping this location. We're not recommending this in any of the near term, but this would be something to look at in the future. Again, knowing that you're going to be very hard pressed to warrant this for a traffic signal, and you're going to look to try to maintain a healthy speed through here, this would be a recommendation. This also cleans up some of the geometry, some of the funky lefts that you've got that sort of come up and then back over, as well as this left exiting merging movement that's going. Looking at speeds, looking at that conflict point here, this helps to bring things, again, remembering you've got interesting driver populations out here where you've got a lot of visitors, you got residents here, you got people unfamiliar with this. And so just trying to standardize this would be one of the things that we would recommend. Another gateway to downtown, also a gateway to the aisles. It helps set a nice breaking point, as well as sort of a gateway into these different elements. Just sort of brings things together from that standpoint. Again, not a short-term recommendation. This is out there a little ways, but it is something, if you're going to look to improve this intersection, this would be the direction that we would recommend that you start to look at and consider as a possible alternative for this. Any questions about 4th and Glynn before I jump into, I guess, what the concern and desire to hear about the downtown area?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
The brown areas, I'm assuming that's some site, either bike trail, multimodal,
Yep.
and
Correct.
right there where you've got your cursor means it's in the marsh jurisdiction area.
Yes.
Are those just suggested? Like, you wouldn't really need all those pathways to go all those different directions, would you?
No, you wouldn't have to. You could combine it to a singular crossing. It could be on the north side. It could be on the south side. Again, that, figuring out what works best for the community, that would be our recommendation. But you certainly don't have to. Most likely crossing on the north, coming up here, crossing over and connecting would be sufficient.
Okay, well, actually,
Or
the bike
south side.
path is on the west side of the street anyway, so, okay,
Okay.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right.
And then I know this is conceptual, but the northbound lane of that thing is too straight to slow traffic down for people entering the roundabout to have a
Yeah.
safe. But
It is.
This is just conceptual, right?
Correct. And we would bring in, you can see the lanes where they are over here. It does have somewhat of a departure over to this. We would exaggerate this a little bit more so that it feels a little more abrupt and is not as quick of an entry and exit. So that deflection is always important. That's a great eye. And thank you for commenting on that. It would most likely kind of come in and more angle in this direction versus how we have it sketched out right now. All right, let's step through a couple other things, and I'll start to tell a story as we get into kind of the downtown, which has been brought up. So let's talk about that. So Bay Street at F Street, one of the intersections we've looked at. You can see the volumes up there. You can see the entering and exiting. Not surprising in the peak hour. Not a whole lot here. Your attractions are on the weekends. In fact, if you look at the aerial, you can see how it's being used right now. There's activity going on at the park. F Street, pretty small volumes in the peak hour, but again, remember we've got traffic volumes coming through here, upwards of 400 in the peak hours for the entering movement. As you start to look at how that's going to grow long term, you see those overall growth volumes starting to rise through here. 2 lanes in each direction out here currently today. Overall ADT of about 6,000 vehicles throughout the entire day, but again, still a very heavy vehicle percentage, 13.8%. That's a lot. Typically, for most corridors that are not adjacent to industrial or terminals, you see that somewhere between the 2 and 4%. So understanding that is important. It affects operations. It affects how traffic moves through a corridor. So it's important to make sure we consider that in our conversation today. Talking about the next street down, Gloucester. And looking at that operations, again, we've got a hawk signal or a rapid flashing beacon that's here. There's been some improvements from GDOT at this location, understanding that connectivity, trying to improve that. Also understand, I was reading through the paper today, there's improvements that are being done, and that was shared with us by GDOT as well. Looking at the improvements here, how that's going to change from the current geometry down to a single lane in each direction and a center turn lane, which will, in my opinion, help overall operations along Gloucester. And then you get over to the water side and how that connects into Mary Ross Park. Again, you can see the volumes, not a heavy amount of volume coming out on either side. Heavy right, though, in the sense of compared to some of the other intersections, 46 and 48 in your peaks. That's about a car a minute. So there's a little bit of volume there. And again, looking at where the volumes are going, they're still moving through the corridor. It's a parallel facility. It's parallel to Newcastle. It gets you in and around. But also looking at that left volume that's trying to turn into the downtown. A lot of people see this intersection as that. You can see overall operations and from an existing conditions, level service C or better. Not surprising given the volumes that are out there. But it also tells a story too, what it looks like in the future. We do start to see those degrade as we move forward. Now, a couple things were considered here. We looked at a variety of different things. Again, looking at how you improve connectivity. That was one of the asks of the city. How can you improve pedestrian connectivity? So one of the first things is you look at, as you start to think of from a safety standpoint, how do you minimize the conflicts, right? We've got an active port that's along your waterfront. You've got an active waterfront as well from residents living through here and individuals trying to get over there. So if we can remove the conflict, easiest way is to separate them. It's also the most expensive way. And when you start to think about what that would look like, whether you're connecting through your squares, bringing it over and trying to ramp back down, or you kind of come in a diagonal so that you can get up and over and connect, what I will tell you is that it's very expensive. It's not something that I would recommend in this location because it's very prohibitive to enforce use when it's easier to cross the road at street level. If you're crossing an interstate, you're crossing a divided highway, you're crossing a barrier that you can't get across, yeah, this will make sense. But all the locations that I've ever seen this implemented in, what we find is we come back and you look, and individuals, the communities will end up putting a fence down the middle of the street to control individuals walking across the street because it's just easy. Pedestrians are like water and a lot like traffic. They take the path of least resistance. They're going to go where they feel that it's easiest to cross. And so, while this does give you the option to create a safe crossing of Bay Street, it's one that would be an enormous expense with very little return on that benefit. It may look cool. You may see that it provides great benefit in the sense of a gateway into downtown or separating those movements from the railroad track. But remembering you've got to be 22 feet in the air, and on either side of the actual rails themselves, extend out 6 feet, that 22-foot high box is where you start to work, and you start chasing those grades back and then maintaining 17 feet across each of the travel lanes. You quickly learn that it's difficult to ramp down and get down to a level that works in a measurable or meaningful amount of time. So again, would find this very hard to prioritize or to find a additional funding source unless it was coming from a local source that was willing to kind of go alone for this. Not looking to see a lot of GDOT participation, if any, for a project like this. If you're trying to prioritize it through the MPO, again, it's going to be tough to see that scoring very well because it is such a different feature for that. Again, it's all part of the process. Things like this need to be evaluated. That information helps empower you to make better decisions as you move forward. It was brought up earlier about question.
Yes. This is Mayor Harvey. That pedestrian overpass, you said it's not going to be, we won't get our return on investment. In other words, not too many people will be using it. That's what you're advocating?
Yes, that's correct.
We've been talking about this for years now to get people to our water park, to our park. And it's been a problem. And we've had people try to negotiate those 6 lanes going across when we have a lot of festivals to our park.
Right.
And also you said that if we find another funding source that this probably could be done, that GDOT is not going to be so adamant about doing it.
No, and if the community decided that this was the direction that they wanted to go, I think that you certainly can do that. It's not prohibitive for you to do that. I think if you're looking for the MPO or you're looking for GDOT to help participate in the funding of that, I think that's where it gets complicated from a prioritization standpoint because the cost benefit ratio for them as they're prioritizing funds across the entire state, this starts to fall to a low level. And so it may languish in getting funded. If you were to come up with a funding source locally and were to build this and design this and pay for this on your own, you're going to have coordination with the railroad clearing that. That's going to take a little bit of time. Encroachment with GDOT would take time, but I'm not going to say you couldn't do that. You certainly could. I think where we see these not be successful is when, it goes back to the mindset of a pedestrian, and pedestrians love to take the path of least resistance. So if I'm here in downtown and I see the park over here, while this may be viewed as an impediment for them to cross, in their mind, they're looking at it as, I can get across this quicker in my mind, then I can go up here, come over here, and navigate up and around and then back down.
It's not safe though. It's not,
I know
from a safety standpoint. Basically, it seems that if we have some type of tragedy or someone get hit by a car, then people start looking at things differently rather than we look at the possibility of people trying to navigate those 6 lanes.
And that's a very good point. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. And I did say that at the beginning of this, that this is, when you're looking at conflicts between motor vehicles, which includes cars and trucks and pedestrians, the quickest way or the safest way to handle it is to separate them, to pull them apart, to not have them interact in the same space. This certainly does accomplish that. I guess my only advice to you as you're looking at alternatives of this is they are expensive, and where they become successful is when you find a way to make it the most convenient the most convenient travel path. So if it's
Okay.
right here, that is when you're going to get the most success. I mean, if you think of it from the standpoint, of separating, it does make a whole lot of sense. But if I'm here and I'm wanting to do this, individuals may see this as I've got to come back over here and do this. They may not be willing to do that. I'm not disputing any of the observations about crossing this and how that may be perceived as a pedestrian from that standpoint.
Okay. Another question. Has
Sure.
anyone done a cost analysis on the cost of the bridge? I mean, overpass?
We're in the process of working that up. So we
Okay,
have
thanks.
a meeting coming up. Again, we'll be sitting back down with you and I'll be sharing that information with you.
Okay. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Jonathan, are
Yes.
you saying with the overpass, that would be people walking upstairs or sort of a incline?
It would be an incline. It'd be incline and then there'd be a break and then there'd be an incline and then there'd be a break. ADA and PROAG, dealing with pedestrian access, dictate the maximum length versus the maximum height before you can have a break. And so if you were to build this, you would design it for that. Certainly wouldn't recommend, elevators or stairs or anything like that. A natural incline so that you can get use associated with both walkers and bikers crossing this would be the preferred situation.
So you're saying basically versus walking up, and then some people have an issue with heights,
Right.
and then they would just try to cross the street.
Well, so you're right. So you can't find one solution that solves all the issues that we've got out here on this little section of corridor. And so we can talk about some other options as well, which we were getting ready to transition into. But yes, the safest
I'm
way is
sorry.
going to be to no. These are great
Go ahead.
questions.
Go ahead.
Is to bring them up. I prefer a sloping incline. It accommodates everybody. You don't have steps, and it's gradual. And it fits in the environment a little bit better. So if there's no other questions on this, I'm going to jump to some of the other options.
Jonathan, let me jump in right there.
Sure,
The
absolutely.
distance to cross Bay Street and the 6 lanes there versus the distance to walk up the incline, walk across Bay Street, and then go down the decline on the other side. How much further is that length for someone to have to transverse to get to the other side?
I don't have the exact numbers right at hand right now. But if you're looking at the points that you're crossing on screen, the linear distance is going to be about the same. You're picking up a little bit more because you're going to, transverse across the area to get that grade down so that it's ADA compliant. But overall, you're probably looking at maybe a 10, maybe 20%, depending on how your runoff is, where you actually end up with the sloping, where it starts to come down. Maybe just a little bit more, but it's not a tremendous distance. Again, it's more about the interfaces, where it interfaces with your downtown, especially on the east side, because, again, these come down to use and proximity and how close can you make that so that it's convenient. And if your centroid of activity is right here, then maybe this is a good option for you because it connects your parks through this to the activity center. If it's over here, getting people to walk up here to do this may be a challenge.
I don't know. To me, it seems like the most costly, inefficient way to cross a street because it gobbles up a huge amount of property, getting up and then getting back down. It looks pretty where it crosses the street, but the rest of it, I would be much more in favor of really addressing a ground level crosswalk.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that.
May I make a statement or
Absolutely.
say in 1975, Albert Shalander and I went in together as partners to develop that waterfront. We actually bought the land there where the condos and the offices are on the north side of the park and got a permit to put marina in the property. And we spent $100,000 on traffic study for that project. And in 1975, the traffic engineers said to take that down to a one-way street inbound. And your truck exit would go out at the south end down there to 17. So in 2000, when I was commissioner on Blueprint Brunswick, we spent another couple $100,000, joint city-county project. I know the mayor remembers that. There was a guiding document for investments. That's how the conference center project got. But it was the same issue, and the same recommendation was take down your laneage on Bay Street. And here we have another study going on. My disappointing experience is in government. We get a lot of studies, but we don't see what it's saying to us. Let's talk about why you want to take that down to one lane in and one lane out. Your truck traffic coming in there is coming into a diminishing port historically activity. You take the gypsum rock plant down there is shut down. You have the pellet shipping, concrete products is out. In recent years, and the mayor knows this, I urged the city to step up and buy all of those parcels on the waterfront became available. I haven't done much traveling outside of east of I-95, but I've extensively gone through every waterfront community there is, from Key West to Maine. All of this right in this area is your key area. The truck traffic over the years will continue to dwindle. This is not anything that anybody has said to me, but I'm just saying it now as you prepare for the next future investments for this downtown is, you know, the shipping at Savannah is increasing in size and scope. And I think the port operations for right there at Brunswick with the paper, I think that's eventually, and I'm just saying it for what it is the truth is going to eventually continue to diminish because they're going to ship by truck that paper up to Savannah and put it on those large container ships, and Brunswick's not going to have a container ship operation going in. So your truck traffic is going to diminish over the next 20 years, but 3 different studies since 1975 have said minimize the traffic flow down there. And that's really the biggest thing. Your crosswalk there coming out of Gloucester needs to come straight over to the park, and it needs to be easy. You have your one lane comes in, your car traffic, if it's coming in there to come in downtown, well, they're going to come in that one lane and turn left on the Gloucester. Your truck traffic can go on down, and as it diminishes over the years, it can still be routed out 17. You take that down to one lane, one way in there, you minimize the connectivity, you maximize connectivity for walking traffic across. You also provide a huge amount of parking that you don't have to use on your land space, say like up at Oglethorpe Block. I know during the times back and forth there was where there were parking garage. If you take those 2 or 3 lanes there on Bay Street and turn them into parking, you open a vista of parking, you make an easy access across to that park. And there are very few waterfront communities that I've traveled through that haven't restricted that truck traffic, or it's just gone away, and maximize that disruption right there on that corridor. That's the main disruption. And that's always been the question in all the studies is how do you connect your waterfront to your downtown? And my suggestion was that you look at an inexpensive one-way in and one-way out for the commercial traffic away from your downtown area, and your vehicle traffic and walking traffic will be able to, and parking will be able to increase right there. So that's my piece on that.
Okay. Thank you so much for the comments relative to that. Appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about that. You talked about a variety of different things relative to the corridor. And we did work up concepts associated with that. You can see a variety of different options that are shown there that look at unbalanced, balanced, multi-lanes in, single lane out, looking at the configuration. What I will tell you is that you can see the third bullet there, that there's no support at GDOT for that, for implementation of that. And a couple reasons why. It's counter to the investment made through the GRIP program of maintaining this as a economic development corridor. You've got the desire to have multi-lanes and coming into the port. If over time the port does decide to change operations, to move, to look at other configurations, whatever they may do, I think there could be consideration for that in the future. At this point right now, I don't see that as a viable option for getting GDOT to implement, because again, we got to remember, this is their road. They control this road. This is a strategic highway for them from a mobility standpoint. And as owners of the road, they have a say over this. And I think that's an important factor. And I understand the desire of the connectivity. I understand where you're coming from. Please don't dispute that. But I also understand the realities of where we are relative to ownership. And this is GDOT's road. And I can tell you from their perspective on this is that as you look at the corridor, we need to maintain smooth and effective operations. They see that from an economic development standpoint, as well as one of the largest generators of income for the state of Georgia, which is the Georgia Port Authority. And so that has a say. Economics have a say in transportation. And so again, kind of similar to some of the other improvements we've talked about, prioritization can be tough for a corridor when you're looking at this. Outside of the port moving away or changing directions, or maybe they don't own this waterfront anymore. Maybe the city does own that at that point. I think that is a time when GDOT could be approached and we could look at what does that investment look like. As I look to the future, as far as I see it right now, and looking at how what GPA's ownership of this, I think it's important to remember that it is an active terminal. They are moving things today. There is an active rail line there too, and so those economic assets, if you will, for mobility from the port side are still there. If they change in the future, I think that could paint a future position. I don't want to get your hopes up though. Again, GDOT owns this roadway. And their position is something like this is not viable at this time, given the volume of trucks. Not to dispute they may diminish in the future, but at this point, a 4-lane or a multi-lane facility is desired along this section. I understand that at one point it was Newcastle was the preferred route, then it got shifted over to Bay Street. Looking to the future, you could see things shift around. Is it always going to be pellets? Are they going to move it via truck? Is it going to be moved via rail? Are we not going to ship things out through, terminals? Are we going to have more localized distribution because of the shortage of getting things across the ocean? A lot of questions to answer there on how things change and the dynamics associated with ports and operations beyond the grasp of the study. And so as I look at it from the corridor, metrics, if you will, that are important for me to consider, I have to consider GDOT's ownership of the roadway. I don't dispute that, if you look purely at the volumes, you could make an argument. But again, looking at this as a GRIP corridor, looking at this as a freight corridor, it's going to be tough. Now, I don't want to say I don't have any options, because I do have some other options I do want to share with you.
May I say one more thing on that?
Sure, absolutely.
I've dealt a lot with GDOT. They told me the toll would never come off the causeway.
Mm-hmm.
A previous commission also said there would never be a barrier down the middle of the causeway. And I just, for the purpose of the conversation and the leadership present, that I believe that the city and the county joined forces can have some different conversations with GDOT than the status quo continuing, because it's obviously the crux of all the corridor that you're talking about and the investments you're fixing to make. So that's.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback on that, Jonathan, I would appreciate you kind of keeping your narrative to the option than heavily speaking on behalf of GDOT.
Sure.
At this point, we want to see what the options are, and we'll decide on what we fight for here in this community.
Right.
And we're going to do the best and the safest thing that we can do. And we have to go. If we have to go up against the state, then that's what we'll do. It won't be the first time. And that's what I think Commissioner Fendig just spoke to.
Absolutely, and I understand that. And so the options that are up on screen are a variety of different options. You can see the different corridors. You can see, how you can balance that space out, whether it's parking, whether it's additional planting space. You've got room out there. You can do a lot of different options along there. If you were able to convince GDOT to do something, I would recommend creating a greater buffer between the railroad and the corridor to shift that out. It creates the tangent length. It brings it out further. It narrows down the street, but it also creates a buffer. You don't want to mix a lot of pedestrians with railroad crossings. It also minimizes your influence area as you cross over those crossings. So from that standpoint, I would say that these are options. I can advise you based off what I can see. You can see the different concepts that we've got up there. One of the things that had been asked of us is the potential for small term improvements, something that can be implemented, because these projects can be expensive to implement, as you see there on the first bullet. And so I did look at another option over here, which would essentially look at trying to utilize Gloucester in a different way, taking away that left that comes in. The volume is really small. It's about 5 people that are doing that. It doesn't mean you can't turn left from that through lane. The influence is not going to be that bad. But if you're looking to make the crossing safer today until you could implement something in the future, something that we showed you on the other page, if you're able to do that, this gives you that option of crossing at 2 locations. It builds off of the infrastructure that's already out there with GDOT, with the rapid flashing beacons. It creates a 2-lane crossing. It could be staged at this location over to here. You could also utilize, as I understand it, this is your street to control. First thing I would do is take this down to 2 lanes, 1 lane exiting, 1 lane entering. This is protected. You bring those pedestrians across and you can cross over at this location. The rest of the space, mix it up, put in some parking, utilize that. That gives you a safe place. It brings more parking into this. This is an interim step. And this would be something that could be implemented relatively easy. It could have, again, the mobility that you're looking for to create that safe crossing, help to start that process. In the future, still maintains multi-lanes. This is one of those interim projects that, again, begins to, it strikes a balance between the elements that are there, your goal to improve connectivity to downtown. You're building off the infrastructure that's already there until such time that maybe things change and you're able to do something different. This would be one of the interim recommendations that we would talk about as we move forward. Any questions on this one?
Jonathan, I have a question.
Sure.
Just for clarification standpoint, in your bullets that you had where you said GDOT was not, had no incentive towards the implementation. Mm-hmm. Does that mean they're not supportive in offering any grant funding, or does that mean they're not interested in any changes whatsoever or modifications?
That's a good question. So it goes based off of, if you look at, again, the corridor metrics that you've got for the corridor, it's a GRIP corridor. There's already been a significant investment by GDOT out here. Their goal is looking at economic development, safety, mobility. I understand that you could argue safety depending on the element that you're looking at it, either whether it's a vehicle or whether it's a pedestrian. You could talk about the different aspects associated with safety. As I look at that and I say support, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of looking at it for monetary support, but also looking at prioritization of this. If you rank this among other projects from that standpoint, you're not going to find favorable support for this type of improvement. There's already investment there. The benefit cost as you look at the implementation of something like this could be dicey. It's not going to be there. And so looking at it from the lens of GDOT, I don't see a lot of support. Now, I'm not GDOT. I can't speak for GDOT. But if I look at it based off those metrics, I can draw that conclusion. So I'm speaking from my perspective when I say there's no support. I'm not speaking for GDOT. I don't see a path based off of the metrics that we have to play with that could find a path that would make it successful at that point. And so that's why I made that statement.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. One of the other big issues that we have, even with the improvements that we had to push hard for, the flashing beacon lights, the sidewalk crossing over Gloucester on the south side of that intersection, once you get across towards the west, towards the park, the sidewalks do not align. So a pedestrian has to move out into the Gloucester extension. They have to move into the roadway to reconnect with the sidewalk. That's one issue. The second issue is, if you look at the railroad crossing, there are huge holes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got somebody pushing a stroller in a chair or pushing a book cart from the library, which does happen, they can't navigate. Their cart, their wheels, I mean, are going to go in the hole every single time. It's pathetic.
So and I think that's where, as you look at, let me get it to the screen here, you can see, I'm going to back that up, take that off. I realize what you're talking about. The sidewalk actually resides right here today. It stops. As you come across here, there is some concrete, but then what we would recommend, you can kind of see it here, is sort of formalizing and channelizing this crossing, improving the smoothness of the rail crossing here for pedestrians. There are things that you can do to improve that. But again, protecting those pedestrians, bringing Gloucester down to a single lane exit, a single lane in, allows you to, make these improvements on the interim. This is concrete. It's easy to implement these channelized islands, and creates that safe movement that's on grade is the other nice thing. There's things we can do with, not changing the curb right now. You could do something more formal than this and make it grand. But if you're looking at how do we do those interim things, which was, one of the things that we were charged with, this is one of the first ones that I would look at doing, is changing up the laneage on Gloucester on the west side. You only need a single lane. You don't need multi-lanes exiting through there. This still works for the trucks. There's some things that we can do here to improve this, to create a two-stage crossing that would allow you to maintain the lanes that are out there, utilize the infrastructure that's already been put in, but enhance it as it comes across through here and makes a safer connection into the park.
And who is going to help us get the ear of CSX and Norfolk Southern to actually do this? Because right now, we got what we, I guess, sort of asked for as far as flashing beacon lights.
Sure.
But it's like getting somebody to the water and saying, okay, have fun, go swim, and they don't know how to swim.
I understand that. And that's where partnerships come in, and, working with your state partner. GDOT can be a good partner in that process. I can't speak for them on what they can do, but I know that they can be very good partners in helping to have those conversations with Norfolk Southern, showing them the benefit of this, and, you're not changing the crossing. If anything, you're minimizing it, making it safer. You're enhancing the opportunities there. Now, there could be some discussion about the pedestrians, but those are occurring today, so it's nothing new there. If anything, you are making it safer and channelizing them where they can be seen, where they need to be, and improving that crossing.
Jonathan, this is David O'Quinn. Two things that were said earlier that sort of struck me, and I was trying to put them together. One, you said that GDOT really doesn't want to see much change on Bay Street, if I understood correctly, because of previous investment towards economic development. Is that correct?
Well, if you look at the priorities associated with the GRIP corridor, which was, I'll go back to that original slide. Oops, sorry, don't want to make anybody.
My question is this, and Commissioner Fendig spoke to it. Things change.
Sure.
And if we're talking about economic development, it's an important imperative that the downtown area of Brunswick, which could see significant economic redevelopment, have the opportunity to cross over to that park. because
Sure.
you've got lofts that are coming in downtown. It would be a great amenity for people who are living down there to be able to cross across the street in a
Understand.
safe fashion, which is a draw for people down there, which helps brings business and whatnot.
Sure.
Why would that not be considered economic development? And if we're looking to make changes, why wouldn't that be considered?
Well, I can't speak for GDOT, and I'm basing this off of looking at their programs, and looking at the main. If you look at one of the main elements in the corridor, that is the port. We can debate the health of that. I'm not an expert on that, so I'm not going to speak for that. But as they look at it from a statewide perspective, the port does provide a tremendous economic impact. It may change over time, absolutely, and I understand what you are saying as well. This is the intersection of local and state objectives, where you've got ownership of a roadway, you've got other state entities like the port, and then you got the local side of that, and it's not an easy path. It's not easy to navigate that. It's not because you've got different perspectives relative to that, different ownership, different requirements. I mean, the fact that this is a freight corridor is something that's really important. They are charged with moving freight efficiently. It's tough to do that when it's a single lane. Maybe there's additional conversation that needs to occur with GDOT relative to that, to talk about that. Again, I'm basing this off of the metrics. Yes.
Jonathan, if I could interrupt, this is
Sure.
Wayne Neal. What I think we need to do is have a joint meeting with the Ports Authority, GDOT, city, and the county, and let's start tackling this. We know this is a monumental ask. We've been talking about it as a monumental ask, but I think we could work together with them, find mutual good and benefit to everyone if we can get at a table. And and I'd like to see that happen going forward.
Okay.
There are things here that we want to do for downtown Brunswick that staying with the status quo is not going to get us there. So,
Understand.
But Ports Authority aren't unreasonable. We appreciate very much the impact they have on our economy. We're not trying to hurt them in any shape, form, or fashion, but I think with open minds and a solution-conscious approach, I think we can find common ground. So,
I will coordinate with my project manager and both the city and the county, and we will work towards that.
And
Thank you, John. That'll be great. That'll be great. It's Mayor Harvey. That'll be a good step in our right direction that we want to go into. Thank you.
Okay.
this is Ms. McDuffie, and to the point that's being made, just to keep in mind, when you talk about economic development for the state of Georgia, tourism is number 2 after agriculture. So I think we should keep that in mind and put that in the minds of the people we speak with.
Okay. Very good point. All right. Let me jump to the concluding slide here, given the time that we've got. So next steps, just heard another action item. We'll add that to that. We're going to refine this. I'll take your input, coordination with GDOT. Again, that's up there. We just talked about. We've got a meeting coming up in a week now with the VATS, the MPO, to give them an update. And then we're going to have some follow-up conversations with each of you again. I'll come back to you in May. We'll be developing a final report and then a final presentation in June. And so that's where we are headed right now. Any questions?
I'd like to thank you for the presentation. It gives us to a point of conversation, and that is what we're working toward. From the county standpoint, working with the city and seeing what we can do together to move forward. So I appreciate it. Good information, and we'll go from there. If anyone else has anything, please jump in.
This is Mayor Harvey. I think you're right, Chairman Neal. I think as we move forward, we'll be able to do some things. What's best for our community. Realizing the fact that I know the state is looking for the overall state, but we still have to live here in our community. and I think we can find some agreeable points and make things better. So I agree with you 100%. And thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate your time, not only the special meeting, as well as your insight and information, and look forward to further conversations with each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. This was the only item on our agenda today. And so unless there's a closing comment, is there by anyone?
Chairman Hill, this is Pamela Thompson. I would just like to let everyone know that the Georgia Association of MPOs met yesterday, and they approved grant funding for the city of Brunswick to take the lead in a bicycle corridor study along Altama MLK. So that's actually the 4th traffic grant that the MPO has received to focus on transportation in our area.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. That's good news.
That's good news. Yes.
All right. One last chance. Does anyone else have a comment before we close our meeting today?
Yes, let me say something too.
Can you hear me?
You ever hear Johnny Casey? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I can't get this thing off mute from time to time, but this was really great. It really was, and I want to tell you, I appreciate all the comments and everything, and I think what I see here this afternoon is cooperation, but cooperation in things away from Bay Street and bringing things over to Bay Street, and I think that's exactly the way this has all got to be approached, is that and the fact that us coming together is going to be just absolutely the greatest thing in the world, to talk to the folks, and certainly appreciate you mentioning setting up the next meeting that will carry this forward, and just a real good meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to say Commissioner Martin joined us, and any other commissioner joined during that time?
Yes, Commissioner Williams is here.
Thank you, sir. All right, Chairman Nielsen, back to you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. And from the county standpoint, did we have anyone else join? All right. Hearing none, this meeting will stand adjourned. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for the comments today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
This meeting
you.
is adjourned.